All right, so good morning, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Leahy. I'm from the Career Services Center. I'm a Career Services Advisor, and today I'm here with our two distinguished guests who will speak to you today not only about their dynamic careers in the psychology field, but also about opportunities that they at Cal State LA and Cal State Northridge. Today we have with us Dr. Pamela ScottJohnson. I have to read this because their accomplishments are so amazing, and you have their bios in front of you. Dr. Pamela ScottJohnson is the Dean of the College of Natural and Social Sciences at Cal State LA. She is an active member of the American Psychological Association Board of Directors and the Leadership Institute for Women in Psychology. She's also the National Advisory Board member for Project Kaleidoscope and serves on the Southeastern Psychological Association Committee for Equal Opportunities, amongst many other things. Then we also have with us Dr. Jennifer Vargas Pemberton, who is an assistant professor of marriage and family therapy program at Cal State University, Northridge. She's a psychologist in private practice and the director of training crisis program manager at the Child and Family Guidance Center. So we thank you for being here with us today. And I would just like to ask you all in the audience if you could please silence your cell phones and hold all of your questions to the end. I also want to let you know, many of you may have seen as you came in, we have some flyers in the back corner describing the Career Services Center and the services that we provide for you. And I wanted to acknowledge my team members. We have Lisa Moss, she's our internship coordinator over there in the back corner. We have Joan Kang, our service learning coordinator, also over there in the back corner. And we have Jenna Gaussman, our career counselor, who also has a master's of science in educational psychology, so another career that you can do in psychology. And although she serves here as a career counselor, she can also answer any transfer questions that you may have related to your SMC coursework at the end. At the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. So with all that said, I'm going to turn it over. I'd like to start today's presentation by asking both of you if you can tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got your start in the industry, and the advantages and disadvantages of the field. So if we could start with Dr. Pamela ScottJohnson.
Sure. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's really great to have a look and to look out in the audience and see you. It's been a minute since I've actually been in a classroom teaching students. But my industry is higher education. I did, however, spend 10 years in a corporate environment. My background is in behavioral neuroscience, and so that's the study of brain and behavior. And in particular, I studied taste and smell. So you can see how that fits well with the Fortune 500 food company. And, by the time we took all the fat, salt, sugar, and everything else out of your food, it was known as grass, but it tasted really good. I left that industry and came into higher education, and I spent, several years as an assistant professor, an associate professor. And then what really began to kind of pull on my heartstrings was, how were we going to train the next generation of students? How were we going to make sure that there was more diversity, more women in the field of psychology? And not just in clinical areas, because most of you, when you think of psychology, you think of clinical psychology. But what about industrial organizational psychology? What about cognitive psychology? All the ways that your desk and your books are designed to help you think, and that your desks are designed by industrial I/O people that really resonate with what kind of position do you need to sit in, and how does the structure of your phone and everything need to work so it optimizes use. So psychologists really are experts at understanding behavior, and there are a wide range of organisms for which we do that. And so as I came back into the environment to build neuroscience classes, cognitive science classes, I thought I also just want to make sure that there are greater opportunities. So I started off teaching at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, which is an all-females institution. It is also my undergraduate institution. I left Spelman and went to Princeton to study neuroscience, and then I've had just numerous opportunities. And so as an administrator, and I always challenge my own students at Cal State LA to spend a day with me. My goal is to really make sure that we have processes that allow the faculty to do their best work and that allow you, the students, to have success. So that, in a nutshell, and in any given day, they're what I call kerfuffles. That means things happen. You know, the world, there's life that goes on in campus. But the main goal is to make sure that you're empowered, that the faculty who are engaged with you are empowered, and that the staff around you are supported so that we can better serve all of you.
Thank you. Would you like me to repeat the question as well?
No, I think I have it.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Early welcome to this amazing field if you do end up entering it. The psychology field is so diverse and there's so many different opportunities that I can say today that I absolutely am passionate and love what I do. And I've been doing it for over 25 years. So hopefully in 25, 30 years, you'll wake up and say, I still love what I do. So just to give you a sense of what I've been doing for the last 25 years, after I graduated UCLA, I went to USC to do my bachelor's degree in marriage and family therapy, and then my PhD in counseling psychology. And in that program, you have to do practicum, what's called practicum, in order to do clinical services. So one of the practicums that I did back in 1993 was at Child and Family Guidance Center, which is at that time was a trauma-focused agency for children and adolescents and families. And I knew at that moment I fell in love with that job, and I told my colleague, I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna work here forever, and it is actually what I did. So I went on and did a postdoctoral fellowship there, and I stayed on and developed a crisis program there, and the director of training there, running a postdoctoral fellowship and a practicum program for other students that are training to become counselors and psychologists as well. So along the way, I also have a really strong interest in research. So I became a research psychologist at UCLA, and I was able to do that for 15 years and study the effects of trauma on ethnically diverse populations as well as substance use. So it worked really beautifully with my clinical work, and my research work really came together really well. So I tend to do a lot of things. I did that for, I would say, 15, 16 years. And then I continued on at Child and Family Guidance in doing clinical work, supervision, training, and then I did some private practice, and I started teaching at Santa Monica College, adjunct teaching in the psychology department, and fell in love with it and felt like, oh my gosh, I want to do this also forever. So I ended up getting a teaching position at CSUN 2 years ago in the marriage family therapy program. So I'm doing the assistant professor position at CSUN, where I'm also working with Strength United, which is a trauma agency, and continuing to do clinical work. So that's pretty much how I started, and I get to do a lot of different things, and like I said, I absolutely love it. So I'm hoping you will find career choices throughout that will really fit who you are and what you want to do in this world.
And that's actually a great segue to our next question. We'll hold all the questions from everyone. If you just want to write them down, we can go through them at the end, because we just want to make sure we get through a lot. Can you tell us about some of the career opportunities in psychology? Are there non-masters and non-PhD options? What do the salary ranges look like based on degree? Are there any opportunities for AA degrees in psychology?
Sure. So one of the things that I like to make sure that you have access to are resources. So there is a resource called careersinpsychology.org. I have a PowerPoint, and you'll get access to the PowerPoint. In that PowerPoint, it kind of lays out for you a number of things. What can you do with an AA degree? What can you do with a BA degree, a master's degree, and a PhD degree? If psychology really is about understanding human behavior, or a major aspect is about understanding human behavior, because at the end, human beings is who we want to impact, then there are lots of opportunities, whether it's in human resources, as a research assistant, as a resource for students or individuals with disabilities, or in just terms of human agencies. And in that particular resource, it lays out everything from the salaries, $14 an hour, $18 an hour. But I think that the both of us would encourage you to do a couple of things. One is to finish your AA degree and go into a bachelor's program. Now, we I think ably represent the Cal State system, but you're in a rich environment in this city for the number of institutions that you could think about in terms of the next step. You should also think about, so I love the fact that Jennifer is talking about the work that she's doing with marriage and family counseling. But there are a number of growing individuals who are aging. Many of you may think about being an aide or assistant to someone who's aging. Gerontology is a very rich field. So what I want to really expose you to is the fact that, I think when I grew up, there were all these TV programs about forensic psychologists, but not understanding that these people are clinically trained and licensed and have specialties in working with law enforcement. But that's just one field. And so what I want to kind of gear you to is to explore. So you have careers in psychology. I'm on the board of directors for the American Psychological Association, APA.org. There are 53 divisions in that, from industrial organization, military psychology, educational psychology, industrial organizational psychology. Each of those has a name of individuals. And there is a California Psychological Association. So there are individuals that would love to have a student call and say, can I shadow you for a day? Can I come and do an informational interview? And I'm sure my colleagues in the career services have been telling you these things. But when we're grinding it out every day, looking at policies, writing papers, doing research, crunching our numbers, trust me, we'd love to have a student or someone new in the field call us and say, I heard about your organization, or I read about your organization, or I looked you up on the web, and I would like to schedule an interview, an informational interview, because it's really about exposure. I think we talked about the fact that, yes, the opportunities that you get may be many, but the access to those opportunities are only designed through what you will do. Now, some of you in the audience may be really, really shy. That's okay. But you can write down a script for yourself and read the script. But it does take a little bit of courage to talk to somebody that you've never heard before or that you've never talked to before. So this is really about, what can you do with degrees in psychology. So we encourage you to get into a bachelor's program. Why is that important? Well, you can work in a nursing home or you can work with children with certification, but you want to understand why you're doing the things that you're doing. You want to understand or be knowledgeable and exposed to the research that's behind that. One of the things that I love to do, is to be more athletic. So my family, my father was a football coach, and my brother played professional football, and my son happens to coach volleyball. And so when they call and talk about their athletes, it's very different when you're coaching women than when you coach men. How do I know that? Because there are sports psychologists that understand if you take, how many of you are athletes here? or just played a sport? I know. Yeah, call yourself an athlete is a different thing. How many of you have played a sport? So you know, if you're coaching a group of young men and you say, sit over there until I talk to you, a guy has a certain way about it, and they'll come back and they'll fight with you. But if you say that to young adolescent women, how many of you, when you felt ostracized, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore, and you withdraw? So that's about understanding human behavior. And it's about psychologists working with coaches to understand their players, to get them to perform better. That's not by happenstance. And yes, there's some great coaches. And yes, I will be in front of the TV watching the NCAA all weekend. But the point is, psychologists help people understand how to work with different constituents. And so what I want you to do is to take those ways in which you think about psychology and the more traditional avenues. We definitely need people who are counselors in the school system and in the community psychologists because of the level of trauma and because of the ways that we work in the world. But did you know that psychologists also work on campaigns? Why do you think people dress up in blue suits? Why do you think they approach the podium the way that they do? Why do you think that you have a particular perception about the person who's speaking? Because a psychologist has helped them with their speech and their presentation and how they approach the podium. It's not just marketing people, even though there are psychologists in marketing. What I'm saying to you as a field that broadly understands human behavior, there is everything available to you. Every avenue available to you, from Google to the grocery store, and how they're set up. And there is a scientific approach to that. So you have clinical, you have applied psychologists, you have research psychologists, you have people who don't even work with human beings, like me. I didn't work with human beings. I did most of my research and understanding those biochemical processes of food through studying animals, but they are translatable. And so we are encouraging you not to just stop here at the AA, but we're also encouraging you to get experiences and then continue to your bachelor's and to your master's and to a PhD. But each of those levels has opportunities for you. So don't let anybody say to you, oh, you're majoring in psychology, there'll be nothing to do. And my last little bit, because I know that we want to share, I want you to start to think about the skills that you are getting in your classrooms. Because when the career day comes, I have so many students that would come back to say they were looking for psychologists. Well, you have to tell them what you got. You want to tell them, I know how to do research. I know how to look for primary resources and think critically about what they mean. I know how to do analysis. How many of you done a statistics class or any math class? You say, I understand something about making comparative analyses or relational analyses. That's what you're getting. How many of you have ever written a paper, a sentence, anything? You say, I want to break this down so that you understand you have much more talent and many more skills than you give yourself credit for. And I don't care if you're struggling in class, you are actually, if it weren't a struggle and if you knew it already, you should actually be doing something else that would challenge you. And so I want you to know how to market yourself as a psychologist, because whether or not you call yourself a psychologist, so technically you have to have been licensed and you have to be able to put out a shingle and be certified. But you have all the skills to work anywhere you choose to because of your commitment to understanding human behavior. And then I'll just stop there.
That was great.
And just to add just a little bit, because I think you covered really everything you need to know, but it is a very diverse field. Some of you will have an idea of, I really like to work with children. I really like adolescents. I'm really interested in substance use. If that's the case, there's so many settings that really are available to you with an AA or a bachelor's degree that I would encourage you to look into that. For example, if you're interested in working with children and adolescents, you can do the one-to-one shadow or case management. You can work in residential counseling centers, things like that. So think about the different settings that you're interested in and possibly getting some experience there as you move through your academic career.
You would think that we rehearsed this because you always give a great segue to the next question. Is what are some good associations, clubs, internships, volunteer opportunities in the psychology community that someone can participate in that will make them more eligible, competitive for transfer or for careers?
So one of the things I really encourage is whatever organization or interest that you have, look for the club at the college that you're at to join that. So I know there's a psych club here. That would definitely be the club to join. If you have a passion in terms of cultural issues, ethnic diversity issues, sexual orientation, diversity issues, look for all of those kinds of networking possibilities, because that's where you're going to network with peers and find out more information about places to get jobs and get linked and get referred. So start with the school that you're at, and then there are local associations and there are national associations. So there's American Psychological Association, there's the Western Psychological Association, there's the Los Angeles County Division. So there's so many different clubs and organizations that you could be part of. Women's organizations, men's organizations.
So how many of you have thought about the fact that you want to get honors? So there's Psi Beta. So Psi Chi is the National Honor Society in Psychology. It was established for those who were at the undergraduate level, and then you continue participation. And usually the chapters are on college campuses. But I had colleagues who were very active in what's called Division II, the Society for Teaching Psychology, and the Education Directorate of the APA, and they worked to create Psi Beta. Psi Beta is the honor society in psychology at the community college. So I don't know, so each institution establishes its own criteria. I think at the national level it's a 3-2 or it's a 3-0 or 3-2, and depending on how many students are eligible, they may make it a little bit more stringent. But so in addition to the psychology club, and I agree with Jennifer, you really should be thinking about how to develop your leadership. I will add that it was psychologists that helped to establish the framework for what is leadership. How do you evaluate good leadership? So you want to look at all of those avenues. And in terms of transferability, so both of us at the CSU are 23 campuses that are structured and designed and have feeder institutions where many of you will go to. And there are criteria for getting in. So you want to make sure that you've completed a lot of your general education requirements, and look on the departmental web pages for the other kinds of requirements that you have. That's the best way to be competitive. Having completed your GE requirements or the requirements that are listed on those websites as you go in. But the main thing is you want to show what you can do, because wherever you go to school, you should be saying in your mind, they should be glad to have me. Right? I'm really here, in the words of an old Saturday Night Live sketch, too old for you all to know because you're too young. I'm here to pump you up, okay? If you've ever seen those old Saturday Night sketches, right? Because the reality of it is, most of us kind of walk around in the world like we're not good enough, like we don't have it all. You are sufficient for who you are and for what you can contribute. And there are some other things you can learn. I'm going to say that again. You as an individual are sufficient for who you are and who you are as a being. And there are some skills you could develop and some information you can gain and learn. Those are two distinct entities. You as a being and what you need to know. And so if you don't get in one school or you don't have the criteria or it's tough, just keep trying. But the world is designed for those who will continue to persist, because if you give up, then the talent that you are in the world will not ever be realized. And that's important to me, is that you realize that each of you has a gift, and we need that gift in the world, more so today than ever. And I probably said that last time, because there's always some kerfuffle in the world where we need more talented people who are committed and who are passionate at what they do. And so, getting into the UCs, to the CSUs, they are challenging, but you have the skills and you have the talent, and you may need a little bit more knowledge, but it doesn't mean that it's outside of your reach.
The other piece I want to add in terms of networking and getting more education, more information, is there's so many conferences that are available on different topics. So if you start searching for conferences, they give you not only the training and education that maybe you're not getting in your program, but it gives you an opportunity to network with other people in the field, to speak to presenters that are specializing in the area. An example is in September, there's the Latino Mental Health Behavioral Conference, and that's a great conference to understand ethnic diversity issues and cultural issues as they pertain to Latinx communities. Trauma conferences, substance abuse conferences. There's conferences in almost every area that you can think of. And part of the association, all of the associations have their own conferences. So American Psychological Association has a yearly conference, different places in the world or in our United States. Western Psychological Association, the conferences are very close. So I encourage you not only to think about joining associate memberships, student memberships, but also to go to conferences to get more education and as a networking opportunity.
So the Western Psychological Association is April the 25th through the 28th. Cal State LA is the host of that conference. It'll be in Pasadena. If you are interested in coming to that conference and you would like to be my guest, and I guess I'm committed because I'm on video, please make sure you pick up my card, or basically also let Ann know, and then I will see what I can do to have you be our guest at the conference. So that's really local. I think if you get to Union Station and the Gold Line, you can actually get to the conference if you don't have access to the cars, to transportation. But that's an opportunity to see who's in the field. And I love this kind of framework about, all the different ways. So there's the Association of Black Psychologists. There's the Asian and Pacific Island Psychological Association. There's the Latina Psychological Association. There's Women in Psychology. So there are opportunities for any way that you're interested in people in the world. Come and join us. We'd love to have you.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to know if you guys could talk a little bit more about what the programs at Cal State LA and Cal State Northridge, what the students could expect, what they should prepare for, what's available to them, just a little bit more so they can get their mindset.
I'm gonna let you start because you're at the ground level.
So some of the bachelor's level programs is the psychology department. You could get your bachelor's degree in psychology. There's also a bachelor's degree in child and adolescent development. There is many graduate programs like the social work department. There's public health. There's school psychology, career counseling, marriage and family therapy, which is what I'm doing. So there's many different opportunities in terms of how you can get your psychology background, either as a bachelor or as a master's. Liberal arts to get you into teaching. Psychology is a beautiful background for teaching, because you're working with kids, adolescents, young adults that you need to understand their social, emotional, and behavioral functioning in order to really help them academically, right? In order to teach. So there's many opportunities that way.
Okay. So one of the things I did when I moved from an industry job to coming into teaching was to join the division of psychology that spent a lot of time talking about how do we construct the undergraduate degree in psychology. And so if you go onto the apa.org and go into the Education Directorate and you look at what are called good practices for psychology undergraduate programs, here are some elements that you'll find. It's important that you learn to think critically. That is the basis for any kind of research. And sometimes we make research sound like mysterious, and you expect somebody to be showing up in a white coat. No, it means I have some questions in the world that I want to ask. I'm going to use the agreed upon methods in the field to investigate those questions, and I'm going to disseminate that information, and then I'm going to have my colleagues take a look at it and either acknowledge that I'm the smartest person in the world, and God forbid they should say I'm the stupidest person in the world, right? So that's really what research is about. It's really about discovery. So that's why every undergraduate degree has a statistics and a research method program. So when I advise students and they would struggle and they say, oh, I'm just leaving psychology or I don't want to be in that because I don't want to do any math. Well, guess what? Welcome to the world of analysis through numbers, right? Also known as statistics, right? Because you want to be able to understand the trends without having to talk individually to millions of people. So a strong program will have that research component in it, that is statistics and research methodology. Then it will expose you to the major fields in psychology, starting out with the introductory book. So the introductory book of anywhere from 14 to 20 chapters covers all of the major discourses. All clinical programs require that you have neuroscience or brain and behavior, because so much of what we're understanding now, when we talk about trauma, the impact on the cellular structures of the brain is one of the newer areas, and I guess new in 10 years relative to the age of psychology, because when you're traumatized, there is a reduction in the brain cell. And this is why it's important that if you're studying childhood trauma and you're faced with certain kind of traumas, that's why it has such an overall impact. And then you have developmental, you have learning and memory in those chapters, you have cognition. And so each of the departments, a broad psychology department, will have each of these major areas. Now, some departments have groups that specialize. In my department, I have individuals that are interested in the cultural framework. So they are multicultural psychologists. I do have two cognitive psychologists. I have colleagues that work with the police department and the juvenile court system. So I have a group that are more forensically oriented, and I think I have a master's program where you can focus on forensic. We have a common colleague who studies narcissism as well as trauma, and I have two colleagues that study trauma. We do also have a family and child studies, which is in the College of Education. And so you're going to look for a program that broadly trains you, because if you're not trained in terms of breadth, and in psychology, the document, and for those of you who are teaching in the department, it's called Psychology Education 2.0. And that means every 10 years as a field, we go to say, well, why are we making students learn all of this material? Given the newness of the world. And what is it that will make them more prepared to go into graduate programs or to use their information in the real world? And so we take this very seriously. I mean, we spend like a week together and everybody's on various committees. But the reason I'm saying that is because I want you to know that we've been very intentional as a discipline to make sure that you have up-to-date information so that not only do you get a chance to kind of come into the field, we don't want it to all be done, like all the major discoveries have already happened. You actually will have an opportunity to put your cut in the world. I mean, who'd have thought that 20 years ago, the emphasis that we have on understanding trauma from multicultural standpoints, from just the nuances, and they're not really nuances. No one thought about studying immigration, except there were colleagues that would study, immigration in Europe and in Africa. And when you have all of these wars, at the time it was, wars in the Middle East, and you had the Catholic and the Protestant wars of Ireland. So psychologists went to understand what's happening to these children that have been in the war zones. And if you've been in major cities where there's lots of gun violence, so that you don't throw away individuals, because every individual is precious and their gift as a resource is needed. We want to understand that. What happens to kids when they're abused? How do they manage seeing certain kinds of traumas? And so you want a program that broadly trains you in that, and then you start to look for, how do I get experiences? There's summer research programs. Those summer research programs, UCLA has a summer research program for undergraduate students. Cal State LA has the MORE, which is Minority Access to Research Careers program. It is a federally funded program where you get paid undergraduate research to be a part of those. So those are competitive. You should look at those. They send you to research conferences. And so that's an opportunity. You want to look for those kind of programs. You want to look for programs where you can be a research assistant, both paid and unpaid. So that as the faculty are engaged in their research, you want them to notice. And how do you get noticed? Having good grades in class, going up to that professor and talking to him or her, asking them about their research, looking them up on the web, and getting access to the research. Because for the money that you are paying to be in an institution to help guide you, it's as much your responsibility as it is our responsibility to make sure that we have high quality in what we're doing. And if you're struggling, and if it's hard, okay, we all struggled. It's been hard for all of us. I mean, there are only a few real geniuses in the world, and they're struggling with other things. They're not struggling with the content of their academic work. They're struggling with how to make friends, how to have relationships with people, and they look at you with envy, and you look at them with envy. So the real key is the courage that it'll take, and it does take courage, and I don't want to minimize that, even though some of you are very assertive and some can be aggressive. It does take a little bit, because it's always like, is that person going to reject me? Are they going to understand me? Am I clear? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. Just declare that, go up to them and say, I'd like to have more information. But that's what you want in a broad program. And we have excellent master's programs.
Right.
So the CSU, you're not able to get a PhD. That's written into the laws of California. But you are able to continue your education because you're not sure what area, what specialty. You may want to get a little bit more research experience under your belt, and graduate programs are extremely competitive. And I just want to throw this out, and please forgive me for being heretical. California is not the only state with PhD programs. There is the entire country. University of Missouri and Columbia, excellent program, and especially in terms of working with diverse populations of students. They have an excellent clinical and counseling program, have sent numerous students there. All of your state flagship schools, University of Maryland and College Park. Now, I know that really is the whole world away, but it's not forever. California will still be here, and you can come back, and you can always start here with California. But we'd like to see you make your discoveries in the world, but you can start now by just being a great student and being intellectually curious and just being who you are.
Thank you so much. I just want to know, is there any, I think we're about to open it up to questions. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions. Was there any last things that you wanted to add before we open it up?
I think for me, I want you all to do your research. Really look at what's available, not just at different schools, but different programs, different areas that you can get into, and use your professors. That's why we're professors, that's why we're teachers, because we want to guide you, we want to mentor you. We're in the field, we can answer questions that may be, PhD versus PsyD, what's the difference? We would be able to help you with that. So please, not just do research online, but talk to people, career counselors, and your professors. I think that they can really help you. Did you want any?
No, we just look forward to your being a part of the field and knowing that there are numerous opportunities. It just occurred to me, I have two classmates. One who was trained in the PsyD program. She was the chief psychologist for the fire department in Atlanta, so that's where she did her training. And then I have another colleague who's a clinical psychologist. She doesn't do this anymore, but all those reality programs that you see, they actually have staff psychologists on board, because you want somebody who can mix it up but not kind of turn the tables over. And so, and those are the funner careers. I mean, I'm more of a traditionalist in a lot of things that I do, but psychology is everywhere.
Now, do you all have any questions that you'd like to?
I have actually two questions, one for Dr. Pemberton and another one for ScottJohnson. I'm going to start with you because you as a counselor for a marriage and family therapy,
yes.
How could you handle the conflict in your family because I saw you have a lot of other stuff doing outside. For example, research is not you just doing outside and then go home and then cook and something like that. How you could resolve the conflict if any happened with your all thing you do during the different universities, here, research and private counseling and the family?
Okay, that's a great question. How do you balance your personal life and your professional life? Yes? Okay. That is very, very important because your personal life, you have your family, you have your friends, your home, you want to be able to do all of that as well as your career. It can't be unbalanced. So it really is going to be up to you to really prioritize things, be really good with time management, set your priorities. So it sounds like I do a lot, and I do a lot, but I don't do 80 hours of my career. I really do structure my career in a way that it allows me to do different, diverse things within a reasonable time to spend for my job, for my career, because that's not everything I'm going to do. And I make sure that I spend time with my family, which is, I think, why I can tell you 30 years later, I absolutely love my career because I've been able to balance everything that I do. And there's something that you're going to hear a lot about is self-care. Mm-hmm. That's a huge, especially when you're a clinician and you're doing clinical work full time, it can really have a toll on you emotionally because you're containing so much clinical information from clients. That self-care is amazingly important, that you have to learn how to take care of yourself, how to re-energize yourself in ways that allows you to not just have the energy to be productive at work and do a good job professionally, but also to have the energy to be caring and enthusiastic at home too. Mm-hmm. So it really is about balance, it's about self-care, and again, ask your professors, how do they do it? Because we can tell you, okay, I do this and I never do that, to give you some tips of what would work for you. But that's a very good question because I believe in having a really good balance between your personal life and your career. At the end of the day, your family is a huge priority. It's mine, and I have fun with my 16-year-old son and my husband and my dogs and my home and everything. So, you're welcome.
For finding a right major for career, actually, and psychology. When I took Psych 2, it's like a neuroscientist. I loved it. I said, okay, I'm going to be a neuroscientist. And then I took marriage, and then I said, oh, I love this one, I want to go this one. And then I built for the clinical behavioral psychology. I said, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. And now I'm in research method, and I said, oh my gosh, that's the one I wanted. And, and how you can find which one is exactly, even you go for internship and do some conferences, okay, how you can select and choose?
Yeah, so you don't actually even have to choose. So behavioral neuroscientists work in brain and behavior. They have to do analysis. Now, it might be difficult to do marriage and family therapy on the animals, but the reality of it but the reality of it is this is an opportunity to discover. I think the best monies I ever spent was I sent 2 students to the National Institutes of Health for the summer to do a research program. And one came back and she said, oh, Dr. ScottJohnson, I'm so sorry, but I don't want to ever do research. And I said, perfect. Better for you to discover that now than to spend 4 years in a graduate program and hating every minute of it. And the other student said, I love this. I like this avenue. So there are opportunities to continue to discover. And it depends. On some clinical areas, the specialty requires that you have more focus. But there is... You don't have to make those cut and dry choices. There's a much more holistic approach in how we look at things. And we're looking more and more at team medicine. There's a kind of formalized name because psychologists are working in hospitals with doctors and social workers and nurses, and they're part of a team. So you can still be exposed in the same area and work through different ways. So you don't have to choose just yet.
Yeah. And many of us do clinical work and research and haven't made a
cut and dry.
Right,
yeah.
we do it combined.
All the, the branches are amazing, and just like.
They are. Some good stuff.
And you have a question?
Yeah, so I understand that industrial organizational psychology is a somewhat new field being introduced into the careers of psychology. So as far as you having any colleagues in that field in industrial organizational psychology, how big of a career is it, or how big of a different branches would I be able to branch out to?
Yeah, so IO is really not new at all. It just seems new because when you're in an environment, in an academic or especially a community college and undergraduate environment, you don't happen to kind of run into IO psychologists, right? Because they're working in industry, they're working in organizations, they're understanding organizational behavior, and they may also be in a business school. So a number of my colleagues who graduated with me in social psychology went into business schools. And so I think it's Division 8, I'm not sure, but there's the Society for the Division of Industrial Organizational Psychologists. The incoming president of the American Psychological Association, Sandra Schulman, she works with a team of people. Their organization or their consulting firm is about 30 years old. So it's not a new field. What I would recommend that you do is to have a lot of strength, not only in your social psych classes and in your statistics classes. But if you're interested in that, again, I can point you to people who are in the city. It's part of what's known as applied psychology. But it's not new at all. And I don't know when that particular discipline's conferences are, but they're great programs across the country. There are several in the systems here, in the UC system. University of Georgia has a great program. University of Maryland has a great program. Minnesota has a great program, but their focus is kind of business oriented. So we don't typically run into those folks in an academic setting because they're out making lots of money.
Yeah, it is more lucrative.
Making lots of money.
Yeah.
And it's very competitive.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to point
Thank you.
people to you.
And then you had a question?
Hi there.
Hi.
So I was kind of curious more about like what you do. So you said it's like biochemical processes related to food.
Yeah.
How did you like get into that?
So when I left Newberry, South Carolina, which is where I'm from, and I went to Spelman College. I'll tell you, my first goal was to become the first black governor of South Carolina. I still have a chance. There's one problem. I live in California. So I did a lot of political science, and I did a lot of stuff where we went to Capitol and lobbying, et cetera, et cetera. There are also psychologists that are lobbyists too, anyway. And so I started with the MARC program. So the MARC program is the Minority Access to Research Careers. I was in the founding cohort of that. It was established through the National Institutes of Health. And then I discovered all of this research. Now, my major advisor was an entomologist who studied bugs and who studied South American cockroaches. But they're really beautiful if you look at their wingspans, but that's a whole nother conversation. And so I got really curious. And then we did this project in our physiological psych class on eating behavior. And, we did these studies where you took out certain parts of the animal's brain and you looked at the behavior. And I thought, I love this. And so then I started looking for graduate programs in neuroscience, and it was a burgeoning field at that time. And because I then got interested in taste and the mechanisms of taste and smell, and particularly in bitter, and then looked at the chemistry of bitter and the etiological framework around bitterness, because things that are bitter, you do what? You go, eh, right? So there are some psychologists that do research on emotions, and disgust is one of them. But there's a physical response to disgust. To eating behavior. And so I had a friend, my parents were high school teachers, and one of their students worked for General Foods, and he gave my name to somebody there who called me up and said, had you ever thought of working in a food company? And I said, no. I lived in a rural community. Agriculture and dairy was all there was. And so, I'm like, okay. And so I really liked what we do. I liked what the company stood for. I liked the end product, but I was at the bench top and doing that. And so, and then neuroscience as a whole. So I have a colleague that sings on the choir with me. She has a neuroscience lab at USC. And so I just like the kind of nitty-grittiness of understanding what the brain was doing. And then there are really fascinating studies as we are more and more attuned to the level of trauma. It can't just be at the emotional level. And so my colleagues who were at Emory University, I think he's retired now, he was looking at, trauma and what happens at the cellular structure when you see trauma. And it's not just in terms of real gory violence, but anytime you're looking at television programs that have all that, I'm really kind of a scary cat. Like if somebody's going to get killed, my daughter and I watched Creed 2, and we were sitting there like, oh, he's going to get beat up. He's going to get beat up. Because he's going to get beat up, then he's going to come back and beat somebody up. But the reality of it is all that has a response on your biochemistry. Just like when you're hungry, your brain tells you you're hungry. When you're sexually interested, your brain is telling that you're sexually interested. And so I always found that all of that fascinating. I just don't have time now to be in the lab, but I kind of miss it. And I had my long nails painted, put on my gloves, and did a lot of animal surgery. And people would think, how are you going to do surgery? I'm like, watch me. And so, but I enjoyed it. And it's, and it was the age where there was the discovery, the decade of the brain, and all of the things that came out in terms of understanding learning principles, and then that fed over to cognition. And so I had a lot of fun and a lot of work that we did. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. So this question is directed towards Dr. ScottJohnson. So I actually have a similar background to you. I got my bachelor's in neuroscience.
Okay.
I'm at kind of a fork in the road right now, trying to decide between master's and PhD. I think the decision is kind of based on my confidence level for PhD. And so if I do go for PhD, I do want to apply next cycle. And so my question is, what would you recommend in this time within this year to kind of boost my chances to get into a program.
So you definitely want to see if you can do some research. So the PhD programs are looking for individuals who are interested in research, but who show a commitment in that. And so, I'd be happy, I have my card, I'd be happy to talk to you about kind of what areas in neuroscience, but UCLA has a great program. I've sent students to that program, and they have a much more integrated neuroscience program. It's not necessarily in the psychology department, because neuroscience is very interdisciplinary. So you can come from the whole systems level through psychology, you can come from the molecular level and the biochemical level. And I have a really great friend at Occidental who does a lot of research. So the thing to boost your application is to see if you can engage in research either at the paid or the unpaid level. But given the field, there should be an opportunity to find some paid research for you, especially in a town like this. Oh my God, this is like research. We got all these R1s. This is high research institutions. So let's see if we can find some names and make some calls to see if you can get into folks' lab. I'll start with my choir member.
Yeah, and even contacting the professors in the area, in the field that you're interested in getting your PhD in, because most likely they're engaging in research as well, and might want you as a volunteer research assistant, which would be really helpful.
Because getting in the lab and seeing how the lab works, and seeing what techniques you can learn and do, that always, kind of helps boost the opportunity. And then to talk about that, and if you get a chance to present at all, then doing that.
Right. If you're on a research team and your research team writes a paper or puts together a poster, you can present that at a conference, which is really helpful if you're getting into a PhD program.
Correct.
Is there any other questions?
This question is for Dr. Pemberton. So you mentioned that you worked at a trauma center for adolescents, is that correct?
Yes.
And that means you work with adolescents that have undergone trauma.
Correct.
So what would you say is some of the challenges and some of the rewards you have when you work with that population?
Okay, so currently I'm at an agency called Strength United, and it's a trauma agency in the Valley, in Van Nuys, Northridge, and Santa Clarita, and then before also Child and Family Guidance Center, and that was for children, adolescents, and their families with trauma. So I'm going to start with the negative piece, and then I'll end with the positive. I like to end more positively. I would say the negative part is when you're working clinically directly with somebody who's experienced trauma, you hear a lot of graphic details of something really painful that's happened to another person. So you're really taking on and feeling a lot of their pain and the suffering that they've experienced. And that can be really hard. It could be very, very hard. And it can change a little bit of the way you see the world. For a while, I stopped watching the news shows because I felt like that would traumatize me. After hearing all of these stories, I would have nightmares. There's something called vicarious traumatization and secondary trauma, where just hearing detailed information about trauma creates similar trauma experiences in yourself. So that's why I got really good at self-care, because I was so immersed in this. So you have to really develop those skills of self-care and having to debrief and getting good consultation and good supervision in order to kind of deal with that. The positive part of it is it's as much as it's challenging work, it's incredibly meaningful to really be able to help somebody through their healing process. It's an honor to be part of their life experience and to allow the person to let you in and be respectful and teaming with them and helping them. So I would say it's just incredibly meaningful. At the end of the day, I feel very honored and blessed to be able to do this work. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
For Dr. Pemberton, what is considered trauma and what isn't?
Trauma is any experience that is painful or hurtful or scary to another individual. So people can look at trauma in different ways. The trauma that we treat at the agency is sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, interpersonal violence, neglect, emotional abuse, community violence, medical trauma, so any witnessing violence, so anything that the person has felt that it has impacted them in an emotional way, that they're having trouble dealing with that. So
it can be like, it can range.
it can range. Bullying is considered traumatic. Anything
What
that
about like severe anxiety or depression? Could that be considered traumatic? Or?
severe anxiety and depression can feel traumatic. It can also be a result of a trauma. And severe anxiety and depression can be either a result of life experience or a biological way that your brain functions that is making it where you're experiencing more anxiety and depression. But either way, if the anxiety and depression is coming from a trauma, it's most likely like post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and there's specific ways of really treating and helping somebody in therapy when they have experienced a trauma and now they have all these emotional results from it, right? If you have anxiety and depression that's more of a brain biological kind of issue, there's also different ways of dealing with it that's maybe not PTSD related.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So we can only take one more question because we're actually at time. But I just know you had your hand up. So if you want to go ahead and ask your question, and then we're gonna wrap up. But I'm sure they'll be able to hang out. But I do think there's a class after this. So did you want to go ahead?
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, great. Thank you. I think I'm interested in social psychology and the research involved in it. And I just wondered if you have a take on some of the replicability sort of scandal that's been happening. I mean, I realize that a lot of the research that happened in social psychology a long time ago was with these small population sizes, like the WEIRD paper, the Western educated, industrialized, rich, developed, like populations. And what the psychology world can do to address that. I know there are things like this Center for Open Science where you pre-register hypotheses and things like that. And I'm just curious about what your take is on how to sort of fix some of the perception or maybe inherent problems in social psychology research.
So social psychology seeks to address how individuals are impacted in a social structure, different from sociology that looks more at a systems level, but it is a combination of sociology and psychologists tend to look at the individuals. And so I'm aware of a lot of the criticisms in social psychology. However, I will say there is good methodology and good research for what was done. There's a very famous study on altruism that happened at Princeton University with the theology seminary in terms of when are you likely to help a person, and it took many years for the School of Religion and the theology and the psych department to bridge that. But the real goal is to be intellectually curious about how things and why things happen. We know that a lot of the earlier studies, whether you're looking at conformity or any of that, were done in the Ivy Towers, whether you're talking Princeton or University of Pennsylvania, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no reason to discount those founding psychological studies, because our colleagues over the years have done more to augment and to elucidate those studies. Another very famous study done by Kenneth Clark, who was part of the Brown versus Board of Education and looking at the selection of white dolls over black dolls by black children to really talk about the negative impact of segregation. The reality of it is that everything you want to research comes from your own life story. And so the reason I'm not going to negate or denigrate those founding studies is because it came out of the life narrative and the curiosity of those sciences. It gave us an opportunity as a field to say, what more do we need to know? what group was missing. Were there men or women that were missing? I studied with Leo Kamen, who is one of the founding, discoverers in learning theory. And one of the things that he, as a good scientist, could uncover is when there was methodological or research fraud. And so you need good scientists to ask questions that dig deep. And when we discover that there's fraud, that's one thing. But when you discover that the framework is just too narrative, then there's the opportunity to create more bandwidth. And so we know, I'm aware of those criticisms, but the reality of it is every person then has an opportunity to look then at the methodology and expand their framework. And you can say that about social psychology or cardiovascular disease, because most of what we know about cardiovascular disease has been done on white males who are privileged. And now we understand why African Americans can't take certain medications or women can't take certain medications. It is the intellectually curious that it allows us to expand the framework, and somebody started the question and answered the question. That's the good news. The other good news is so can other people, and so can there be other resources to expand that. Sure.
All right. Well, I mean, I hate to end this because it is that we have such fascinating and amazing guest speakers. And if we could just give them a hand and thank them so much.